On November 5th, OpenAI Chief Financial Officer Sarah Friar said the following at a conference with the Wall Street Journal.
And so this is where we're looking for an ecosystem of banks, private equity, maybe even governmental, the ways governments can come to bear.
Meaning like a federal subsidy or something?
Meaning like just first of all, the backstop, the guarantee that allows the financing to happen.
A government backstop means that if OpenAI finds itself unable to repay its loans, then the government will step in and repay the loans for them. In other words, a bailout. That same day, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman said something similar about the government as the insurer of last resort. Those two statements sound like OpenAI angling for a government bailout. That sparked controversy, and they both issued statements walking it back saying, no, OpenAI does not want a bailout. White House AI czar David Sachs also intervened, saying that there would be no federal bailout for AI. This comes amid widespread concern about an AI bubble. In short, the massive hype surrounding AI has driven stock prices to very high levels, now constituting a large portion of the total US stock market. AI companies have been spending many billions of dollars on data centers and accompanying infrastructure. And yet, despite AI being seemingly everywhere, the companies are not yet generating substantial revenue. Furthermore, a recent study found that 95% of organizations using AI are getting zero return on their investment. Spurious outputs, known as work slop, may even be reducing productivity. Another study found that software developers who used AI coding tools believed that the AI was making them code 20% faster, when in fact it was actually making them 20% slower. And that's for coding, one of the primary use cases for AI. I should clarify that all of this is about generative AI, including large language models. There are lots of other forms of AI. For generative AI, there might not be a stock market bubble. It remains possible that these companies will grow their revenues so high that they get a decent return on their massive investments. But if there is a bubble, then because of how large these companies have become and how important they at least think they are, it's not hard to imagine them asking for a bailout. At the time of this recording, OpenAI is saying it does not want a bailout. But they were saying something different just a few days earlier, and if the bubble bursts and their company is at risk, they could change their tune again. OpenAI is not exactly a paragon of honesty and consistency. And other companies could also pursue bailouts. Meanwhile, some independent commentators are openly arguing that we should take the idea of bailouts seriously. So in this video, let's take an honest look at this. Are government bailouts of the AI industry actually a good idea? I am a professional risk and policy analyst. I've been working on AI on and off since around 2009, so about 16 years. When I look at the bailouts question, 3 factors stand out. The third factor is the pursuit of transformative artificial general intelligence, the sort of AI that could render humans obsolete and potentially even cause an extreme global catastrophe. This sets AI apart from other bailout situations. The second is systemic risk to the broader economy and the operational functionality of society, which is a good basis for considering bailouts. But before getting to those, I want to start with a little rant. These AI companies took our intellectual property without permission or compensation to build a technology that is filling the internet with slop and driving up electricity prices, all for the promise of mass unemployment and maybe even worse. And they want us to bail them out for their colossal financial mistakes? I don't think I'm alone for feeling this way. A recent survey from the Pew Research Center finds that 50% of Americans are mostly concerned about the use of AI in daily life, with only 10% being mostly excited, the others being neutral. Concern went up in 2023, which coincides with the release of ChatGPT. And bailouts can be unpopular. The 2008 Wall Street bank bailouts fueled both the Tea Party movement and Occupy Wall Street. And if anything, in 2025, people have become even more cynical toward big corporations and the politicians who support them. In a democracy, those are legitimate reasons to not do an AI bailout if that is indeed the public sentiment. However, it is important to recall why we bailed out the big Wall Street banks in 2008. These companies got greedy chasing short-term profits on irresponsible subprime mortgages going to households who didn't have the means to pay them off, and so these households shouldn't have been given the mortgages in the first place. Then, when the mortgages failed, people lost their homes and their savings, and the banks were so buried in it that they started to fail too, and they wanted us to bail them out for their colossal financial mistakes? For all their flaws, the banks do play an important role in the broader economic system. Without banks, a lot of stuff just stops working. As much as it pains me to admit it, that was a legitimate basis for the bank bailouts. It's about systemic risk. And right now, the big tech companies, they also play an important systemic role. Google Workspace and Microsoft Office 365 combine for a 95% market share of office productivity software. 95%. If Google or Alphabet fails, we lose Workspace. Gmail, web search, maps, YouTube. If Microsoft fails, we lose Office, Outlook, Bing, Windows. You know how this works. If Google or Microsoft somehow manages to go bankrupt, as much as it pains me to admit it, there is a case to be made for bailing them out so that this doesn't happen to our economy and our society. But the pure AI companies, OpenAI, Anthropic, XAI, if they die, they die. Now, there has been some talk about OpenAI becoming too big to fail, but it's important to understand it's not about how big the company is, it's about how essential it is to broader economic and social systems. For example, the energy company Enron was gigantic with $100 billion in annual revenue, but when it failed, we didn't bail them out because it wasn't critical to broader economic systems. This article on OpenAI says maybe it is becoming critical due to its large financial deals with other big tech companies. But in that case, we wouldn't need to bail out OpenAI, we would only need to bail out the other tech companies. There are future scenarios in which products from OpenAI or Anthropic or other pure AI companies become so important to the rest of the economy that the failure of that company is worthy of a bailout. That is something to keep an eye out for. For any company that is too critical to fail, there's an argument to be made for public policy that restricts these companies' abilities to take on risk that could result in them failing. In retrospect, we shouldn't have given permission to those Wall Street banks for taking on all of those risky subprime mortgages. And right now, we maybe shouldn't let Google and Microsoft and possibly some other big tech companies take on any financial risks that would threaten their solvency. That would protect us from needing to bail them out if they fail. Now, I can't tell you what the current risks of any of the big tech companies failing is. That's outside of my expertise. But I can provide some reasons to, fortunately, be less concerned. First, Those Wall Street banks were highly leveraged, making bets that they couldn't afford to pay off when they failed. Other companies tend not to use leverage like that. Second, prior to the AI boom, the big tech companies were sitting on huge piles of cash, so much that investors were getting upset at them for holding onto it instead of paying it out as dividends. That may have been bad for investors, but right now it means that these companies are much less likely to face bankruptcy even if the AI sector implodes. And finally, the reason they had so much cash on hand in the first place is that they run profitable businesses. Even if they've taken on some debt to fund their AI investments, they may be able to pay that off just by tapping into their existing income streams. So, I would really like to think that the big tech companies are nowhere near insolvency and therefore would have no need of a bailout. They don't seem anywhere near as reckless as the Wall Street banks were in the subprime mortgage crisis. But again, this is outside of my expertise. Other people are much more qualified to comment on this. What is very much within my expertise is the prospect of artificial general intelligence or superintelligence, basically any form of AI so advanced that it could radically transform the world for better or for worse. This is the explicit goal of a lot of these AI companies, and some of them have been pursuing it for years. I published detailed surveys of AGI R&D in 2017 and 2020, documenting activity all around the world. Let me first say that today's technology, including generative AI, is not that. It is substantially less advanced. Whether or not it is on trajectory to get there is a major point of debate within the expert community. This is part of a broader debate about fundamental approaches to AI such as deep learning. I can recommend this excellent study for details. I tend to doubt that the current trajectory is heading toward AGI or superintelligence, but there is uncertainty and that matters for bailouts. First of all, if we are heading toward AGI or superintelligence, and especially if it is happening within the next few years as some people project, then there probably won't be a major downturn in the AI sector. So no bailouts. Instead, it raises a different set of policy issues. But if there is a downturn, it will offer a chance to reevaluate how we as a society want to pursue advanced AI, or if we even want to pursue it in the first place. Right now, advanced AI is being pursued primarily by corporations operating on a private, for-profit basis. OpenAI even switched from a nonprofit to a for-profit. These companies might talk a good game about pursuing the best interests of humanity, but do we actually trust them? Do we trust the companies that keep nickel and diming us with nonstop ads and monopoly pricing? Do we trust the companies that are stealing our intellectual property and filling the internet with slop? Do we trust the companies that, instead of coordinating with each other to make sure that AI is built at high standards of safety and ethics, are instead racing against each other in pursuit of the market share they need to satisfy their investors? These companies are not universally bad. I know for a fact that some of the people in these companies really do want to do right for the whole world. But there's a case to be made that the really extreme advanced AI is too important for the public to be pursued by the private sector. If there is a major downturn in the private AI sector, this would be a good occasion to shift things to the public sector. Perhaps we should do that instead of bailouts. And finally, China. Those commentators hinting at support for bailouts, this is what they're thinking about. They don't want to see the advanced, world-changing AI built and operated by China, and they're open to bailouts to ensure that we win and they lose. First of all, we need to be very careful about people in the US falsely inflating the threat from China. Second, we should be pursuing diplomacy with China to avoid catastrophe. Indeed, we've already been doing this on AI and nuclear weapons systems. But if we must compete against China, let's make sure that we are doing it safely and for the public benefit. I don't think we need bailouts for that. In fact, looking across the entire bailouts issue, The only case I can see for bailouts is if it's necessary to keep certain critical companies from failing, especially Google and Microsoft. That said, as a professional risk and policy analyst, I acknowledge that there is uncertainty and that what I've presented here may not cover everything.